Well, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me indicate that it's a privilege and honor to be invited by the organizers of the Cambridge Africa Day to deliver this lecture. I must indicate again that the existence of this lecture series undoubtedly provides a unique opportunity for University of Cambridge community to learn more about Africa, as we just heard, and more importantly, highlight potential areas for strengthening cooperation in future. I'll trace briefly the historical evolution of relations between the UK and Africa, particularly in the area of Western education, and then consider specific examples of past and ongoing relations between the University of Cambridge and Africa. Finally, I will touch on some specific areas where relations between Cambridge and Africa could be taken to greater heights, which will be mutually beneficial. This is coming from the point of view of an entomologist, not a historian. Now, from the 15th century, traders from nearly all the leading European nations established links with various parts of Africa. European interests in the continent was, generally speaking, commercial up to the year 1880. Until the transatlantic slave trade was abolished, European nations were very much involved in this trade. Between 1870 and 1900, Africa faced European imperialist aggression, diplomatic pressures, military invasions, and eventual conquests and colonization. This period is described as the scramble for and partitioning of Africa. During that era, Britain took possession of colonies in North, West, East, and Southern Africa. Thereafter, Britain brought her political philosophies and culture to bear on the people it had colonized in these territories. There were multiple sectors in which the linkages between Britain and her colonies developed, including introduction of Christianity and religious training, creating nation-state out of disparate tribal communities, education, and infrastructural development. But as academic, however, I would want to focus on examining the historical and current Western education linkages between Africa and the United Kingdom generally, and in particular, between the University of Cambridge and Africa or Ghana. The focus of the examination is to identify achievements chalked which could serve as foundations for even greater engagement, reducing mixed opportunities and perspectives on how to avert missing productive collaborative engagements in future. Western educational institutions and systems introduced by Britain to Africa have evolved into an important cornerstone of the enduring relationship between Britain and former colonies in Africa. Right from the beginning of the 19th century and earlier, selected young Africans were sent to schools in Britain to receive Western educational training in order to return and take up positions in the churches and colonial administration. In addition, wealthy Africans from the British colonies sent their children to England to be educated and trained as lawyers, doctors, and engineers. Thus, in Ghana, for example, members of the elites of the 1920s and 1930s in the Gold Coast, equipped with European education, came from the old established families such as the Hitton Mills, the Bannermans, the Thompsons, the Kotipapa Fields, the Quajer Agris, and so on. The emergence of these elites or new social groups is of extreme importance because it was primarily their frustration with the colonial system, arising mainly from the economic and political limitation it imposed on them, that was to generate a feeling of nationalism and anti-colonialism which heralded independence. The educational relationship between Britain and her former colonies in Africa survived the end of colonial rule and have endured to date. Following the attainment of political independence after World War II, the former British colonies started sponsoring students to pursue higher education in Britain. Now in control of their political and economic destinies, following the demise of British colonization, those countries, including Ghana, saw the need to take a cadre of civil service personnel to Britain to study various courses so that upon their return, they could bring their knowledge and expertise acquired in the West to bear in the task of development and become managers of the beginning social institutions and organizations. At present, the core of university lecturers and professors in many African countries were trained in the United Kingdom, other parts of Europe, and more recently in the United States of America and Japan. British institutions of higher learning, including the University of Cambridge, trained Africans who were offered scholarship by the UK and other British-based foundations, such as Vice-Chancellor, and the bilateral and multilateral agreements with the former British African colonies to sponsor students to pursue higher education in Britain. Among several scholarship programs that allowed many scholars from Africa to be trained in the United Kingdom and specifically at Cambridge University are the Rhodes Scholarship, the Gates Cambridge Scholarship, the Cambridge Commonwealth Trust Scholarship, the UK Commonwealth Scholarship, and Overseas Development Administration Shared Scholarships. These led to the development of scholars who were more inclined towards the West than Africa. As a result of protracted economic slumps, violent crisis, bad governance in some of these former British colonies, African scholars immigrated to Europe and the United States. The chain of achievements and world-changing ideas born from within the walls of the University of Cambridge continue to transform and benefit the world at large, and Africa in particular. For example, at a time when there was not a single university in the Gold Coast and other British colonies, and the colonial administration was tight-fisted on expenditure on university education, most people came from the British colonies to the University of Cambridge to acquire knowledge. These sons and daughters of Africa returned with their expertise to their various countries to help in the development of their states. Some also became lecturers of various universities in the United Kingdom and other European countries, as well as in the United States. Growing up, graduates of University of Cambridge or Oxford University were highly regarded in the colonies, as they were considered to have achieved or received the best of Western education. Formal education in Ghana dates back to 1592. Before this time, education was mainly informal and was based on apprenticeship until the arrival of the Europeans. The main goal of education at this time was to make civilization march hand in hand with evangelism. At the beginning, the European merchants set up their schools in forts such as the Elmina and Cape Coast customs to educate the mulatto, that's the mixed race children. But with time, it became apparent that formal education for all the natives would be much more beneficial to the British cause. It's recorded that in 1831, 2 Ashanti princes were sent to the Cape Coast Castle School to be educated at the expense of the then governor of Gold Coast, Maclean. They were Owusu, son of the Ashanti Hen of Seyau, who reigned from 1824 to 1834, and Owusu Ansa, the son of his predecessor, Osebonsu, who reigned from 1800 to 1824. The 2 Ashanti boys were later sent to England to further their education. They returned to the region in 1841 as British agents. By 1874, Ghana, then Gold Coast, was a British colony, and the British government had full colonial authority over the Gold Coast colony. By this time, great strides have been made in the education sector, with mission schools scattered all over and the beginnings of a framework to help better manage the educational system. In 1934, the British government founded the British Council to help respond to the growing threat to British interests in its colonies. The first overseas offices were opened in 1938, while the British Council was granted a royal charter with a mission of promoting a wider knowledge of the United Kingdom and the English language abroad and developing closer cultural relations between the UK and other African countries. The British Council began by providing a range of educational support, particularly in English, math, and science teaching. This included teacher training, syllabus development, broadcast of educational television programs, and university development. In addition to these, fellowships, scholarships, and workplace exchanges were provided to trainees and professionals in practical subjects, including electrical engineering and agriculture. University of Cambridge link with the University of Ghana dates back as far back as 1948, 1949, when some senior Cambridge staff, including John Donnelly Faye, joined the newly founded University of Gold Coast, now University of Ghana, which was formed under the CAPREx Commission. He spent a decade at the University of Gold Coast from 1949 to 1959, developing his interest in the history of West Africa, and particularly the African slave trade, on which he was to publish extensively over the coming decade. The university started facing funding problems after 1955, and many of the senior Cambridge staff left. The University of Cambridge has long offered opportunities to train human capital to meet Ghana's human resources and developmental needs. The University of Cambridge and University of Ghana has collaborated since 2010 in various ways, with the University of Ghana drawing on the strengths of the University of Cambridge's experience in research and to help build its research capacity. Before 2010, University of Cambridge faculty were involved in various collaborative research programs with the University of Ghana faculty. Out of these collaborations came discussions on providing better support for research at the University of Ghana. At the time, the University of Ghana was implementing the recommendations of the visitation panel. Yes. So in 2010, the University of Cambridge hosted 2 staff members for a study visit to learn about research management as a means of building capacity to start the University of Ghana's Research Office, that's the Office of Research, Innovation and Development. The success of this visit led to further discussions on how University of Ghana could draw on Cambridge expertise to help build faculty research capacity through its Cambridge Africa program. It was at this time that the idea of the Cambridge Africa Partnership for Research Excellence, CAPREx program, was born. In 2012, the University of Cambridge received funding for the Carnegie Corporation and the Isaac Newton Trust to implement the Cambridge Africa Partnership for Research Excellence program. As most of you are aware, the CAPREx program is a partnership program between the University of Cambridge, University of Ghana, and Makerere University, and aims to build up research capacity in the 2 African institutions of the partnership. The CAPREx program falls under the broad Cambridge Africa program, which is a working partnership between the University of Cambridge and several African universities and institutions that support the training of African doctoral and postdoctoral researchers. It aims to strengthen Africans' own capacity for sustainable research and mentoring culture by cultivating the talented individuals who will make this long-term goal a reality. The Cambridge Africa program also provides linkages to researchers in several departments, as well as key staff in offices across the University of Cambridge to Africa for mutually beneficial collaborations, networking, fundraising activities, and communication. This linkage with the University of Cambridge through the Cambridge Africa program has created access for the University of Ghana faculty to other funding mechanisms managed by the program. The program, which is currently in its second phase, 2015 to 2018, provides support for the development of African academic research excellence through the three-way partnership aimed at promoting the recruitment and retention of the brightest academic staff at these regional hubs. The project goals are being implemented through the strengthening of faculty research capacity, strengthening of research management and administration, and the development of joint research projects. One of the major focus areas of the project is the strengthening of faculty research capacity through the provision of postdoctoral research fellowships for early and mid-career researchers at both University of Ghana and Makerere University. Selected fellows spend up to 6 months at the University of Cambridge to work with their Cambridge collaborators on a research topic which is relevant to building the research capacity of their departments at the University of Ghana. Fellows also have the opportunity to engage in a variety of training, seminars, and networking opportunities to enhance their research links and skills. To date, the program has announced 4 calls for proposals, which in total has yielded 63 expressions of interest, 34 full applications, and led to the award of 27 fellows for the University of Ghana alone. University of Ghana has seen a steady increase in the number of applications and awards since the program first started in 2012. Currently, the gender split for the fellowships awarded at the University of Ghana is 66.7% male and 33.3% female. The CAPREx program also recognizes that building research capacity can be successfully achieved if capacity is also built in research, administration, and management. So in May 2012, 2 senior research managers from the University of Cambridge Research Operations Office visited the University of Ghana and undertook a detailed scoping exercise to understand University of Ghana's research management system and procedures, and also to identify any gaps which, when addressed, could greatly improve or enhance University of Ghana's research management efforts. Based on the information gathered and the recommendations from the scoping visit, the University of Cambridge Research Office developed a tailored training program for research managers from both Makerere University and the University of Ghana. The first phase of the program provided training for a total of 7 research administrators or managers from the University of Ghana between 2012 and 2015. The program, which was designed by the University of Cambridge Research Office, covered areas such as research services and costing a grant, audits, compliance, policy and communication, pre- and post-award services, post-award and accounting, contracts and intellectual property, donor reporting, amongst others. Now, beyond the skills and experience or expertise gained from the research management training, this training also provided opportunity for University of Ghana research management staff to begin to establish strong personal links with Cambridge Research Operations Office staff. The immediate impact of the fellowship was that it provided a better understanding of the range of services that should be provided by an effective and efficient research office, and also created the need to put in appropriate guidelines and regulations for managing research at the University of Ghana. Additionally, various workshops, including research management and academic workshops, are held periodically as part of the capacity building efforts. Generally, they provide opportunities for participants to reflect on their strengths, weaknesses, and expectations, and also debate on the importance of engaging both academic and non-academic audiences to help promote research uptake by policymakers, media, the entire public, etc. An interesting aspect of the CAPREx program is that fellows are also able to apply for the Aborada grant in collaboration with their Cambridge-based mentor. And so to date, 27 University of Ghana CAPREx postdoctoral research fellows have received this grant to implement joint research programs with their Cambridge-based collaborators. Through this collaboration, the University of Ghana has been able to win huge grants from Wellcome Trust and the World Bank, designating the University of Ghana as one of World Bank Centers of Excellence in Infectious Pathogen Research. In conclusion, let me indicate that there's a shift in the place of Africa in the world today. It's exemplified by Africa rising and the resoluteness of African economies in the face of the global economic downturn. This shift is real and will continue for the next half-century. Yet, the existing relationship between African higher institutions of learning and those in Europe have not changed. This calls for a paradigm shift in the way we have developed the next generation of scientists. There's a need for a more inclusive African-Britain partnerships involving academics at both ends to work together towards joint training of students in split programs. Some of the challenges we face in the world today, from food security and climate change to sustainable energy, are global. So too are the solutions we seek. The complexity, the scale, and the urgency of the challenges demand that University of Cambridge and African universities work together. Africa must be doing some things right. Yet the filtering of such new knowledge back into Britain, Europe, and USA in order to produce resolute and enduring solutions to global problems is largely absent. The old model of Euro-American charity to Africa is still being used to govern these educational relationships. Africa should lead some of the research initiatives, with Britain playing a supporting role in solving African problems. African universities should begin to lead the process of knowledge generation and the burden of knowledge economies in their various countries. There's a need for a new type of partnership where Africa is an equal partner in knowledge generation and utilization, working hand in hand with Euro-American counterparts to produce innovative and creative thinking and solutions, not just for Africa, but for the world at large. Thank you very much for your kind attention.